The story continues just as softly as the sound of rain lingering on the windows of memory. In our previous chapter, Adrian Blackwood, the billionaire whose presence commands silence, first crossed paths with Anna, the young waitress at Velour Café. It was not love at first sight, not even kindness at first glance. He arrived with the air of a man too used to control, too used to walls built high around himself. She greeted him with the quiet politeness of someone trained to serve, but unwilling to bow her spirit. Their first meeting ended not with warmth, but with a lingering question: what would happen if their worlds collided again? Tonight you will find out. And before we begin, if you enjoy sinking slowly into stories that unravel with drama secrets and unexpected turns, remember to support this journey. Like the video, subscribe to the channel, and leave a comment sharing how you imagine the ending might unfold. Your thoughts shape the path, and your presence keeps these midnight tales alive. Now let us return to the cafe, where fate has decided to open its doors once more. It was another morning at Velour Café, the kind that looked ordinary on the surface. The scent of roasted beans floated through the air. Sunlight spilled in warm sheets across polished wood, and Anna moved with quiet grace between tables. She wore her crisp white blouse and apron hair tied back neatly. Sleeves rolled high as she carried steaming cups of cappuccino and croissants dusted with sugar. Customers filled the cafe more than usual. Business people checked their watches, students murmured over laptops, and older couples shared the calm of silence together. And then, as if on cue, the door opened. Adrian Blackwood stepped inside. He was hard to miss, tall, deliberate in movement, his black suit pressed so sharply it seemed untouched by the morning rush. A few heads turned, not because they recognized him instantly, but because he carried himself with the elegance of someone who belonged in magazines, not in a crowded cafe. Yet those who did know whispered almost immediately, half in awe, half in gossip. Anna noticed him at once, and her hand tightened around the tray she carried. She did not stumble, did not falter, but something in her eyes shifted. He had returned. She told herself it did not matter. A man like him would come and go as he pleased. Still, a weight pressed quietly against her chest, as though she were bracing for a storm inside a room filled with sunshine. Adrian moved toward an empty table by the window, his gaze sliding briefly across the room until it landed on her. For the smallest fragment of a second, his expression softened. Then it vanished, replaced with the same cold mask. He sat down, set his phone beside him, and waited without speaking. Anna approached, pen and notepad in hand. "Good morning," she said, her voice professional, steady, though her pulse betrayed her calm. "The usual." "The same," he replied simply, eyes never leaving the window. She turned away, but her thoughts whispered against her will. Why again here, of all places in the city? Why return to this cafe? The cafe buzzed with chatter, the clinking of cups, the hiss of the espresso machine. Anna prepared his order carefully, as though precision could build a shield between them. Yet as she placed the cup before him, Adrian spoke in a tone that carried further than he perhaps intended. "This isn't quite as warm as it should be." The words, simple and detached, cut sharper because they came in front of others. A pair of students glanced up, one raising a brow at Anna. A businessman chuckled softly into his newspaper. Anna's cheeks warmed, though not from embarrassment alone. She bit back the first retort that formed on her tongue. Instead, she gave a brief nod, collected the cup, and turned toward the counter to adjust the drink. Behind her, whispers stirred. "Isn't that Blackwood, the CEO from the headlines last year? Didn't he have some scandal? Something about a broken deal? Maybe even a divorce?" Anna did not intend to listen, but the words reached her anyway, planting themselves like thorns in her mind. She set the cup down harder than necessary, then drew a deep breath. When she returned to his table, Adrian looked at her directly. His eyes were sharp, but something unreadable flickered beneath. He took the cup without thanks, without apology, and Anna stepped away. Her heart caught between irritation and reluctant curiosity. The door opened again. This time the energy of the cafe shifted almost instantly. A woman walked in, tall, elegant, draped in a dress of deep burgundy that seemed too striking for a casual morning. She carried herself with the poise of someone accustomed to being watched. And indeed, everyone was watching now. Her gaze found Adrian within seconds. Her lips curved into a smile not of warmth, but of recognition sharpened by memory. She crossed the floor, heels clicking against wood, and stopped beside his table. "Adrian," she said softly, yet loud enough for nearby ears. still hiding in places like this. Anna froze mid-step, caught with a tray in hand, pretending to focus on another table but unable to stop listening. Adrian's jaw tightened, though he remained seated. "This isn't the place," he muttered. The woman leaned slightly closer, voice smooth as silk but edged with steel. "It never is it? But the past always finds you." Gasps whispered through the cafe like a breeze rustling leaves. Someone's phone angled discreetly, capturing the scene. Anna felt her chest tighten with something she could not name. Not jealousy, not sympathy, just the confirmation of what she had suspected. This man was woven with trouble. Adrian rose slowly, his chair scraping lightly across the floor. He towered over the woman, his presence commanding but not entirely in control. "Leave," he said firmly. But the damage was done. The cafe was no longer a place of morning comfort. It had become a stage, and he, its unwilling actor. Outside, the clouds had been gathering. Rain tapped faintly against the glass, threatening to break into a storm. Anna collected empty cups with deliberate calm, though her thoughts raced. She told herself she had no reason to care, that his world of secrets and sharp voices was none of her business. Yet she could not deny the spark of unease. He had returned, and with him came shadows that stretched further than the walls of Velour Café. As she passed near his table once more, their eyes met briefly. Neither spoke, but the silence between them carried more weight than words. The day pressed forward, customers came and went, but the air never fully cleared. When Adrian finally rose to leave, Anna caught the briefest glance of him pausing at the door. It was not hesitation exactly, but something close to it, as if he wanted to look back and yet could not allow himself the weakness. And so he walked into the gray light beyond the glass, leaving Anna with the uneasy knowledge that this was far from over. For storms once begun rarely end with a single cloud. The rain had not yet begun, but the weight of the clouds pressed against the windows of Velour Café, as though waiting for the right moment to break. Inside, the air was thick, not only with the aroma of coffee, but with whispers that now swirled around Adrian Blackwood like smoke. Anna moved with careful precision, delivering drinks, wiping down tables, clearing plates. She told herself she was unaffected, that she had seen difficult customers before. But this was different. This was not just a man being difficult. This was a man who, without raising his voice, carried the power to wound her dignity in front of an entire room. Moments earlier, his words had cut through the chatter like a blade. "This isn't quite as warm as it should be." Simple, almost indifferent, yet placed precisely where it would sting most in the open, with eyes upon her. She had swallowed her anger, then focusing on remaking his order, but the echoes of his complaint lingered, and as she stepped back into the main floor, she could feel the weight of those eyes again, watching to see how the play would unfold. Adrian sat unmoved, fingers scrolling absently across his phone, as though the entire world were no more than a mild inconvenience. His posture was immaculate, back straight, one leg crossed, wristwatch catching the golden light. To any stranger, he looked like a man who owned not just his fortune, but the very air he breathed. Yet Anna noticed what others did not: the faint tension in his jaw, the way his hand gripped the edge of the table just slightly too hard. He was not as untouchable as he seemed, though he would never allow the world to know. She set his corrected cup before him with a quiet steadiness. "Hotter," she said simply, her tone clipped professional. No smile, no extra words. He glanced up at her eyes, meeting hers briefly. The silence stretched not long enough to be obvious, but long enough for her to sense the calculation behind his gaze. And then he nodded, accepting the cup without thanks. At the table near the counter, two young men leaned close, their whispers poorly concealed. "That's Blackwood, right? Adrian Blackwood, the one who dumped his ex after the merger collapsed. I heard it was worse than that. Fraud. Or maybe just scandal. You know how billionaires are. They never get caught, but the stories always leak." A woman seated nearby leaned in with hushed urgency. "Don't talk too loud. He'll hear you." Anna's hands clenched around the tray she carried. She told herself she didn't care, that these were not her concerns. But the words filled the cafe like a draft, slipping under a door, cold and impossible to ignore. Adrian heard. She knew he did, though he showed no sign. Only the slightest flick of his gaze toward the reflection in the window betrayed that he was listening. Then it happened. One of the businessmen seated across from Adrian raised his phone. He did it casually, as though checking emails, but the lens was angled directly toward the billionaire. A small red light blinked once, recording. Another followed suit, tilting her phone to capture the scene. Within seconds, 2, 3, perhaps 4 lenses were aimed subtle but unmistakable. The cafe had shifted from a sanctuary into a stage with Adrian at its center. Anna noticed. She hated it. Velour Café was meant to be a place of warmth, of comfort, not a theater of scandal. Yet here she was, forced into the periphery of a spectacle she neither invited nor wanted. Adrian lifted the cup at last, sipping with deliberate calm. He set it down gently, his voice low but clear enough to carry. Better. 2 syllables. That was all. But the room leaned in, hungry for more, as though waiting for a verdict in a trial. Anna wanted to roll her eyes, to throw her rag down, and declare she had no patience for this performance. Instead, she forced herself to remain still, wiping a nearby table with mechanical precision. But inside, her thoughts churned. Why come here again? Why me? Is it just coincidence, or does he choose this place for some reason? Her chest tightened with the memory of his first visit, the unshakable sense that his gaze had lingered on her longer than it should. She hated that she remembered. She hated more that she cared. The elegant woman in burgundy had not yet left. She stood now at the far side of the cafe, leaning gracefully against the counter, pretending to stir her tea. But her eyes never left Adrian. Every so often her lips curved into the faintest smile, a smile meant not for kindness, but for power, the kind of smile that said, I know something you don't. Anna caught the glance, felt it burn into the atmosphere like smoke. The woman wasn't just a stranger. She was a thread to something larger, something heavier, and she carried herself like someone who intended to pull that thread until everything unraveled. The tension reached its peak when Adrian finally set his phone aside, leaned back in his chair, and surveyed the room. He was aware of the cameras now. He knew the whispers, the recording, the scrutiny. Yet instead of shrinking, he spoke. His voice was calm, steady, but loud enough to silence the hum of conversation. If you're looking for entertainment, he said, his gaze sweeping over the nearest tables, you'll be disappointed. The cafe froze. No one laughed. No one spoke. Adrian lifted his cup once more, took a slow sip, and set it down with deliberate grace. Anna felt her breath hitch. It was not charm, not warmth, but command. He had reclaimed the stage with only a sentence. And, yet beneath it all, she felt the undercurrent of arrogance, the reminder of why she distrusted him already. This was a man used to bending the world with his words, to silencing rooms, to making dignity feel small in his shadow. She turned abruptly, carrying her tray back toward the counter. She did not look at him again, but her heart beat faster, not with admiration, but with unease. Because storms like this did not end here. They only gathered strength, waiting to break. The air inside Velour Café had shifted. What began as a busy morning with the comfort of roasted beans and sunlight now felt like the heavy pause before thunder. Conversations were no longer about work deadlines or travel plans. They circled around one man, and his name was whispered like a rumor, escaping every corner of the room. Adrian Blackwood. Some voices carried it with admiration, others with disdain. To those who only saw the suit, the watch, the posture, he was impressive. To those who remembered headlines, he was a scandal in flesh. Either way, he was no longer simply a customer. He was the story everyone wanted to tell. At a table near the entrance, 2 women leaned close, their voices low but urgent. I told you that's him. The Billionaire CEO, the one from the trial last year. Her companion frowned. No, I think that was just a business lawsuit. He walked away, untouched, didn't he? Exactly. Doesn't that make it worse? People like him always walk away. Their laughter was quiet, but sharp enough to cut. Anna, carrying a tray of empty plates, did not mean to linger, yet the words caught her lodged like splinters beneath her skin. She remembered the way Adrian had spoken earlier, cold, detached, the kind of voice that could crush without raising volume. And now these whispers gave it context. They made sense of her instinctive mistrust. She told herself it was not her business. Customers came and went. Their lives did not belong to her. And yet she could not shake the thought that every rumor she overheard added another stone to the wall she was building between them. Further back, a pair of students huddled over their phones. Look, one said, tilting the screen. It was a headline from months ago showing Adrian's stern face beside the words, CEO Blackwood ends marriage amid allegations. Allegations of what the other asked. Doesn't matter. The word's enough. It stains. They laughed nervously, glancing toward Adrian as though half afraid he might sense their curiosity. Anna did not see the screen, but she heard the tone. And sometimes tone is worse than fact. Adrian remained still at his table, sipping slowly, gaze fixed on the rain-darkened window. To the untrained eye, he seemed untouched by the growing storm around him. But Anna, watching from the counter, noticed the subtleties, the way his shoulders tensed, the faint tremor in the fingers that gripped the porcelain cup. He was listening. He always listened. And then, like a shadow, stepping fully into light, the woman in burgundy moved. She had lingered long enough, sipping her tea at the counter with predatory patience. Now she rose her heels, clicking softly, carrying her across the floor until she stood only a breath away from Adrian's table. The cafe hushed almost instinctively. "Still pretending you're untouchable, Adrian?" she asked, her voice smooth, perfectly measured to carry just far enough. Adrian's eyes slid toward her, slow and deliberate. "You shouldn't be here." A faint smile tugged at her lips. "And yet here I am. Because the past doesn't disappear when you put on a suit and step into a coffee shop." The words fell heavy. Customers leaned closer, some openly, some with the pretense of nonchalance. The students lifted their phones higher. The businessman at the far table adjusted his camera angle. Anna felt her pulse quicken. This was no longer an ordinary morning. It was a confrontation dressed in velvet and shadow, and she was trapped within its walls. She told herself to turn away, to retreat to the safety of her duties. But her eyes refused. She was caught between fascination and dread. The woman's voice softened, but every syllable was sharpened with intent. "Do you really think you can silence everyone that this city will forget?" Adrian set his cup down carefully. The clink against porcelain was soft, but in the silence of the cafe, it struck like a bell. His jaw tightened. His eyes, usually cool, now flickered with something darker. "This isn't the place," he said, each word precise. "Isn't it?" she countered, tilting her head. "Funny, I thought places like this are perfect." Small, crowded, filled with witnesses. A ripple ran through the room. A chair scraped. Someone coughed nervously. The tension was alive now, tangible. Anna's breath caught. She wanted to look away but could not. And in that moment she realized something unsettling. The woman was not simply here to confront Adrian. She was here to perform. To peel open the facade in front of strangers, to expose him piece by piece where no amount of wealth could shield him. Anna did not care for Adrian. If anything, her dislike had grown since his first visit. But still, there was something cruel in watching another human cornered like prey. She hated herself for feeling it, that flicker of sympathy, drowned quickly by suspicion. A murmur passed through the cafe. One voice said, "Is someone recording this?" Another replied, "It's already online." Anna froze. Already online. The words struck her like cold rain. Her gaze darted to the phones scattered across the room, all angled discreetly, yet unmistakably toward the scene unfolding. The cafe was no longer just a cafe. It was an arena, and the world outside its windows was already being invited to watch. Adrian rose at last, slow and controlled, towering over the woman. His presence filled the space, a silent warning, but she only smiled, unshaken. "Careful, Adrian," she whispered, though her voice still carried. "You know how fragile reputations can be." And with that, she turned, walking away with the grace of someone who believed she had already won. The cafe exhaled, but the air was not lighter. It was heavier, dense with the residue of spectacle. Conversations burst to life again, but they were no longer about coffee or meetings. They were about him. Anna stood frozen at the counter, tray in hand. She did not look at Adrian as he adjusted his cufflinks, sat down once more, and lifted his cup with deliberate calm. But she felt it, the shift, the confirmation. Whatever he carried with him, it was dangerous. Not in the way of fists or weapons, but in the way of whispers that clung, in the way of shadows that followed through doors. And somewhere deep inside, though she would not admit it, Anna understood this was only the beginning. For storms, whether of weather or of scandal, never arrive all at once. They build, they gather, and when they finally break, they do so with fury. Silence lingered even after the woman in burgundy drifted toward the door. Conversations resumed, yes, but not naturally. Every laugh was forced. Every whisper carried a trace of what had just happened. Velour Café was no longer a cafe. It had become a theater that morning, and its audience would not forget the scene so quickly. Anna carried a tray of pastries to a nearby table, her step steady, her face carefully blank. But inside, her thoughts roiled. She hated the way people had stared, the way phones had angled, the way her workplace, her sanctuary of routine, had turned into a stage for someone else's drama. And more than that, she hated that Adrian Blackwood sat there, still calm, composed, as though none of it mattered. She approached his table reluctantly to clear away the empty cup. Her movements were brisk, professional. "Finished?" she asked, voice clipped, not looking him in the eye. "Yes," he replied. The single syllable was smooth, untroubled. As she lifted the cup, her hand brushed against the phone he had left on the table. The device lit up with the touch, revealing a notification, a news alert with his name in bold. She caught only a glimpse before turning away, but it was enough. Blackwood Enterprises under fire. Her jaw tightened. She told herself she should not care, that it was none of her concern. Yet the words sank like stones into her mind, adding weight to the unease she already felt. At the far side of the room, the woman in burgundy had not left after all. She lingered just beyond the doorway, visible through the cafe's large windows, her silhouette framed against the gray sky. She spoke into her phone, lips moving quickly, eyes darting occasionally back toward Adrian. Anna noticed. So did Adrian. Their gazes collided for an instant, not with each other, but both aimed at the same figure outside. Anna's look was wary. Adrian's was sharp, almost predatory. The woman turned, smiled faintly, and disappeared down the street. Inside, the tension did not fade. A young man at a corner table muttered to his friend too loudly. "He looks calm, but imagine what he's hiding." Men like that always bury the worst things. Anna's eyes flicked to Adrian instinctively. His face remained impassive, but she saw it again, the faint clench of his jaw, the smallest crack in the mask. It unsettled her, not because she pitied him, but because it reminded her of something dangerous. He was human, and humanity made people unpredictable. She returned to the counter, stacking dishes, wiping surfaces that were already clean. Anything to keep her hands busy, to keep her from thinking. But then a voice startled her. "You believe them." She looked up. Adrian stood at the counter, closer than she expected. His tone was calm, but his eyes held something sharper. "Excuse me," she asked, forcing her voice to remain steady. "The rumors, the whispers, you believe them." Anna straightened, chin lifting. "It's not my place to believe or disbelieve. I just work here." A pause, a silence thick with words unsaid. "Of course," Adrian said finally. His lips curved in something that was not quite a smile, not quite a sneer. "That's safer." And then he turned back toward his table, leaving her rooted behind the counter, heat rising to her cheeks. She hated him more in that moment than ever before. The cafe clock ticked toward noon. Customers trickled out, some carrying the memory of scandal with them, some still whispering as they passed through the door. The hum of normalcy tried to return, but it was thin, fragile. Anna forced herself to focus on routine, refilling sugar jars, straightening chairs, polishing silver. Yet every movement felt heavy, tainted by the shadow that lingered where Adrian sat. When she passed his table again, she noticed he had left a bill on the saucer, generous more than the cost of his order, but it did not soften her. Money, she thought, was the easiest way to erase a mess. And she would not let him erase this one. As Adrian rose to leave the cafe, seemed to shift with him. Conversations dipped, eyes followed phones discreetly lifted once more. He ignored them all, adjusting his cufflinks, smoothing his suit, walking with the kind of grace that looked like control, but felt to Anna like arrogance. She turned away, refusing to watch him go. Yet when the door closed behind him, she felt it, the hollow space he left behind. Not relief, but a different kind of heaviness, as though the storm had stepped outside, only to wait for her later. Rain pressed harder against the windows, now droplets streaking down in uneven lines. A low rumble of thunder rolled in the distance. Anna stood behind the counter, staring at the darkening sky. For reasons she could not explain, her chest felt tight, her breath shallow. Perhaps it was exhaustion from the morning's chaos. Perhaps it was the memory of that woman's words, "The past always finds you." She shivered, though the room was warm. Velour Café was quiet again, but it was the kind of quiet that comes before a downpour, heavy, expectant, and full of tension. The storm outside had gathered weight clouds, thickening into a bruise-colored sky. Raindrops tapped with restless fingers on the tall windows of Velour Café, as though demanding entry. Inside, the storm was already underway. Adrian sat at his table, finishing the last of his coffee with the calm of a man refusing to bend. Yet the silence around him was deceptive. Conversations had shifted, whispers grew louder, and more phones had quietly tilted his way. Anna noticed each one, the glint of a camera lens, the faint glow of recording screens. She hated it, not because she wanted to defend him, but because this cafe had once been her place of comfort. Now it felt like a trap. And then the door opened again. The woman in burgundy returned, her silhouette, framed by the gray light and dripping rain. She carried herself with the poise of someone walking onto a stage she owned. Heads turned immediately. The whispers sharpened. Phones angled higher. Anna's stomach tightened. She set a tray down harder than intended, the porcelain rattling. She wished the woman had simply vanished into the storm. But no, she had come back, and she came with intent. She crossed the floor without hesitation, her heels clicking like a countdown. Customers leaned back in their seats, some shifting for better angles. It was no longer just gossip. It was a performance, and everyone wanted the front row. Adrian, she said, her voice smooth, almost affectionate, though her smile carried no warmth. Still hiding here. Adrian rose slowly, his chair scraping against wood. He faced her with a stillness that felt dangerous. "This ends now," he said softly. But the softness was deceptive. It carried a steel edge, the kind of voice meant to silence, to remind the room that he was not a man easily cornered. The woman tilted her head, amused. "Ends." "Nothing ends, Adrian. People like you don't get to walk away clean. Not when there are debts. Not when there are truths left unpaid." Her words hung heavy, tantalizing the audience that had gathered in silence. Phones lifted higher. Screens glowed brighter. Anna stood frozen by the counter, a rag clutched in her hand. She wanted to look away, but her eyes betrayed her. This wasn't a scene she could ignore, no matter how badly she wished to. She told herself it was simple: a man with a past, a woman with a grudge, a crowd hungry for scandal. None of it had anything to do with her. And yet she felt the pull, the gravity of it dragging her into the same orbit. Adrian stepped closer to the woman, his height casting a shadow over her. "Leave," he said again. The woman laughed softly, the sound cutting through the cafe like glass. "Leave. You think you can order me out like one of your boardrooms. No, Adrian. This time you don't control the room." A collective intake of breath rippled through the cafe. Anna's gaze darted to the nearest customers. One woman bit her lip, nervously torn between leaving and staying. A man grinned as though savoring free entertainment. And still the phones hovered. Always the phones. Adrian's eyes flicked briefly across the room. He saw them. He knew every angle, every screen capturing his posture, his expression, his silence. For the first time, Anna thought she saw something flicker across his face, not fear, but calculation. He was deciding how much to reveal, how much to withhold, how much of himself could be sacrificed without collapsing entirely. But the woman didn't give him time. "You may wear that suit," she said, voice rising. "You may sit in your glass office towers, but you'll never bury what you've done. And sooner or later, everyone will know." Her words cracked through the cafe like thunder. Anna felt heat rise to her face. She didn't care for Adrian, not at all. But there was something ugly in the way the crowd leaned forward, savoring his discomfort. She hated that she, too, couldn't look away. For a brief moment, Adrian's eyes found hers across the room. She expected coldness, arrogance, dismissal. Instead, what she saw unsettled her weariness, a flicker of humanity breaking through the mask. She looked away quickly, angry at herself for noticing. The tension broke with a sudden clap of thunder outside. Rain lashed against the windows, loud and relentless. The cafe lights flickered, once dimmed, then steadied. Gasps filled the air. A few customers took it as a cue to leave, shuffling quickly toward the door, but most stayed, their curiosity anchoring them to their seats. The woman stepped back, finally, her smile triumphant, as though she had already won. She turned, coat swirling behind her, and left the cafe once more. But the damage remained. Adrian stood alone in the middle of the room, every eye still fixed upon him. Slowly, deliberately, he adjusted his cufflinks, smoothed the front of his jacket, and sat back down. He did not speak. He did not defend himself. He simply sat, reclaiming his cup as though nothing had happened. But silence, Anna knew, was not victory. It was surrender of a different kind, a refusal to play the game, even as the world recorded every second. The cafe's hum returned in fragments, but the atmosphere was fractured. Some customers whispered with excitement, some with judgment, some with pity. And through it all, Anna worked in silence, her movements mechanical, her mind restless. She wanted to hate him fully, cleanly, without complication, but the image of his eyes finding hers lingered, and it unsettled her more than any rumor could. When Adrian finally rose to leave the room, shifted with him again. He moved toward the door with deliberate calm, ignoring the whispers, ignoring the screens. Outside, the rain fell, heavier sheets of water cascading down the street. Anna caught one last glimpse of him at the threshold, tall, dark, his figure blurred by the storm beyond. He paused for the briefest second, as though aware the worst was not over, and then stepped into the downpour. The door closed behind him, and with it came a gust of damp air chilling Anna to the bone. She turned back to her duties, but her hands trembled slightly. It wasn't fear, not exactly. It was the certainty that this was only the beginning, and whatever storms Adrian carried with him, they were now spilling into her world too. Outside, thunder rolled again, deep and unyielding. The storm had finally broken. Rain fell in sheets, drumming against the windows of Velour Café until the world beyond blurred into a watercolor of gray and silver. Inside, the last of the morning crowd had thinned. The air was damp with tension and coffee grounds, the echoes of the confrontation still clinging to every table. Anna wiped the counter with mechanical motions, though her eyes kept straying toward the door. She told herself it was because of the storm, because she needed to judge the right moment to make her errand outside. But deep down, she knew it was something else. Adrian Blackwood had left only moments earlier, his tall figure swallowed by the storm. She had told herself it didn't matter that the cafe was quieter without him, and yet the silence that followed was not relief. It was heavy, as though the room had exhaled, but her lungs had not. By the time Anna finished her shift and stepped outside, the storm had grown fiercer. Rain pounded against the pavement, bouncing in frantic splashes. The city itself seemed smaller under the weight of it. Cars crawling slowly, headlights smeared across wet streets, umbrellas bending against the wind. She pulled her thin coat tighter around herself, regretting instantly that she hadn't brought an umbrella. The distance to the supply shop wasn't far. She could make it if she hurried. Still, she hesitated under the cafe's awning, staring at the chaotic street. And then she saw him. Adrian stood a few feet away beneath a sleek black umbrella. His suit was immaculate despite the storm, though the sheen of rain glossed the edges. He looked out over the traffic as though the chaos around him had no power to touch him. For a brief second, their eyes met. Anna looked away at once, her chest tightening. Of course he would still be here. Men like him did not simply vanish. They lingered, always present, always commanding space, even when uninvited. She stepped off the curb, determined to ignore him. The street was alive with sound, the hiss of tires on wet asphalt, the growl of engines, the constant hammer of rain. Anna hurried along the sidewalk, her shoes already soaked her breath, quick and uneven. Behind her, she thought she heard the faint rhythm of footsteps, steady, unhurried. She told herself it didn't matter. But then a car came too fast around the corner. It happened in an instant. The tires sliced through a puddle, sending a wave of dirty water surging toward the sidewalk. Anna gasped, instinctively stepping back, but the ground was slick. Her foot slipped balance, faltering, the world tilting. And then a hand seized her arm. She was yanked sideways, pulled with sudden force, and together they stumbled onto the wet pavement, landing hard against the cold stone of the sidewalk. The wave of water crashed where she had stood a moment earlier, splattering against the wall, soaking the air with grit and filth. Anna blinked through the rain, heart hammering, disoriented. Her hand was still clutched tightly in another's grip. Adrian. He leaned over her, his suit darkened and clinging his hair slick with rain. The umbrella had fallen to the ground, spinning uselessly in the wind. "Careful," he said, his voice low-controlled despite the chaos. Anna shoved his hand away, pushing herself upright. Her cheeks burned, though, whether from embarrassment or anger, she could not tell. "I didn't ask you to interfere." She snapped her words sharper than she intended. Adrian's jaw tightened, but he did not rise to the bait. He stood brushing rain from his sleeve with deliberate calm. "You would have been soaked. Or worse." Her eyes flashed. "And what? You think that gives you the right to drag me around like—" She stopped, realizing how her voice carried, how strangers on the street were now glancing their way. She lowered her tone, but the fire remained. "You cause enough trouble inside. Don't bring it out here." For the first time, Adrian's composure cracked. His eyes narrowed not in anger, but in something closer to hurt, though fleeting, buried almost as soon as it appeared. The rain cascaded between them, filling the silence. Cars passed their headlights, cutting through sheets of water, their horns muffled by the storm. The city continued its rush, uncaring, while the two of them stood still, locked in an uneasy standoff. Anna turned sharply, retrieving her bag from where it had fallen. She clutched it to her chest, shoulders squared. "You should go," she said finally. "Wherever men like you go. Just not near me." Adrian studied her for a long moment. His suit was drenched now, but he seemed oblivious. He looked at her the way one might look at a closed door, considering whether to knock again or let it remain locked forever. Then, without a word, he retrieved the umbrella from the ground, shook it once, and held it above them both. Anna stiffened. She wanted to protest, to reject the gesture, but the rain was merciless, and her body betrayed her, stepping instinctively into the cover it offered. They walked side by side down the slick sidewalk, the silence louder than any argument. Their shoulders brushed once accidentally, and both pulled away as though burned. Anna's thoughts churned. She wanted to hate him cleanly, but the memory of his hand pulling her from danger clung stubbornly. Yet instead of gratitude, it only deepened her confusion. A man who could humiliate her so easily, who carried scandal like a shadow, had also shielded her from harm. What was she supposed to do with that? When they reached this corner, Anna stopped. She stepped out from beneath the umbrella, letting the rain soak her hair, her clothes, her skin. "I'll go this way," she said, her tone final. Adrian inclined his head slightly. He did not argue. He simply watched as she walked into the downpour, her figure fading into the curtain of rain. Only when she was gone did he turn the other way, his shoulders heavy with something the storm could not wash away. Behind them, the city continued to drown in water and whispers. And, though the rain fell hardest now, it was clear the true storm had only just begun. The rain fell harder now, each drop striking like shards against the darkened street. Under the dim glow of the street lamps, water cascaded down gutters and pooled in broken tiles along the sidewalk. Anna walked briskly, her arms crossed, damp hair clinging to her face. She hated herself for standing under his umbrella, hated the strange cocoon it created, isolating them from the world outside, even as the storm battered down. Adrian walked beside her, tall and still, the umbrella steady above them both. His suit, though drenched at the edges, still carried its imposing sharpness. Silence stretched between them, thicker than the rain. Anna could almost pretend he wasn't there, except for the faint brush of his sleeve near hers, the warmth of his presence cutting through the chill. And that, more than anything, unsettled her. A flash of headlights cut through the rain as another car sped past, splashing a wave across the street. Adrian shifted instinctively, angling the umbrella to shield her. She glanced up, startled by the gesture, only to find his eyes already on hers. For a fraction of a second, time slowed. The rain softened, the world blurred, and there was only the closeness of his gaze, dark, steady, unreadable. Her breath caught, and then she pulled back, breaking the moment. "Stop!" she snapped, her voice sharp, slicing through the storm. Adrian blinked, surprise flickering across his face. "Stop what?" "Stop pretending." Her words came fast, fueled by the weight of everything that had happened inside the cafe. "Stop acting like you care. You don't. People like you never do. You sweep in, you control everything, and then you walk away like it costs you nothing." Her voice rose with each word competing with the thunder. Strangers passing glanced their way, pausing under their own umbrellas, curious. Adrian's jaw tightened. He did not speak at first, and the silence enraged her further. "Say something," she demanded. "Anything. Or is silence just easier for you? A neat little mask to hide behind while everyone else cleans up the mess." At last he spoke, his tone low but steady. "You think you know me after 2 meetings?" Anna laughed bitterly. "I don't need to know you. The world already does. They whisper your name in every corner. They record you like a circus act. And you know what? They're right. You walk into a cafe and suddenly the whole place burns because you carry the fire with you." Her words hung in the air, sharper than the storm itself. Adrian stopped walking. The umbrella tilted slightly, rain spilling down his shoulder. His face, usually unreadable, now showed something else, not anger, but a shadow of hurt. "You believe them," he said softly. Anna met his gaze, refusing to flinch. "I believe what I see. And what I see is chaos that follows wherever you go." The rain filled the silence that followed a relentless percussion. For the first time, Adrian lowered his eyes. He adjusted the umbrella, shielding her again, even as he stood partially exposed to the storm. "You're right," he murmured. Anna froze. She hadn't expected agreement, not from him. But the tone in his voice was strange, not surrender, not confession, but something in between. Before she could respond, thunder rolled above, splitting the night with a deep growl. They resumed walking slower now, each step echoing the distance growing between them. Anna's chest still heaved with the remnants of anger, yet beneath it lingered something she did not want to name. Unease, confusion, the faint trace of pity she wished she didn't feel. She clenched her fists. "No, don't let him in. Don't let his silence trick you into thinking it's depth. As they reached the corner where their paths would split, Anna stepped out from under the umbrella once more. Rain plastered her hair to her cheeks, but she did not care. She faced him, voice cold. This is where it ends. Whatever storm you're carrying, leave me out of it. Adrian looked at her, his eyes shadowed by the street lamp's glow. He gave a single nod, no words this time. And, just as she turned away, she caught sight of something beyond his shoulder. A figure half hidden under another umbrella standing still at the far end of the street, a burgundy coat gleaming faintly under the rain. The woman, watching, waiting. Anna's breath caught, but when she blinked, the figure was gone, swallowed by the storm. She walked quickly, refusing to look back again. Adrian remained where he was, umbrella steady, his silhouette etched against the storm like a statue, refusing to fall. And, though the rain poured harder, Anna knew the true danger was not the weather. It was the people, the whispers, the woman, the man beside her whose silence concealed too much. The storm was far from over. The storm showed no sign of mercy. Rain poured relentlessly, hammering rooftops, hissing against gutters, turning the streets into glistening rivers. The glow of the street lamps bled across puddles, bending light into fractured halos. Anna's shoes splashed through shallow pools as she hurried along, head bowed against the downpour. Her thin coat clung to her skin, heavy and useless. She had chosen to walk away to cut ties with the strange man who seemed to carry shadows in his wake. Yet the storm felt heavier now, as if refusing to let her escape so easily. She glanced over her shoulder, once a reflex she could not control. Adrian was still there, a dark silhouette beneath his umbrella, unmoving. For a moment, it seemed he was carved into the night itself. Then he turned, walking the opposite direction, swallowed quickly by the curtain of rain. Relief should have come. Instead, unease deepened. The street was nearly empty. A handful of pedestrians scurried under umbrellas, their faces hidden, their steps quick. Cars crawled past, wipers thrashing headlights, streaking across the slick asphalt. And, yet Anna felt it, the sensation of being watched. Her pace quickened. At the next corner, she paused under a flickering street lamp to catch her breath. Water streamed down her face, blurring her vision. She wiped it away, frustrated, telling herself she was imagining things. The storm, the confrontation, the whispers, all of it had left her nerves raw. But then she saw it. Across the street, barely visible through the torrent, a figure stood beneath a crimson umbrella. The woman. Even at a distance, Anna recognized her posture, straight poised, deliberate. Burgundy fabric clung to her shoulders, glistening wet. Her face was shadowed, but the faint smile was unmistakable. Anna's stomach tightened. She blinked, and a passing car obscured the view. When it cleared, the figure was gone. She swallowed hard, forcing her legs to move. The shop wasn't far. She just needed to reach it, finish her errand, return home. Nothing more. But as she walked, the feeling did not fade. Every reflection in a window felt like eyes. Every echo of footsteps behind her seemed too steady, too intentional. Every gust of wind felt like a whisper just out of reach. Anna gritted her teeth. She hated this. Hated that she, who prided herself on calm and composure, was letting shadows get the better of her. Somewhere behind her, Adrian walked his own path. He had not expected her anger to cut so deeply, though perhaps he should have. He had seen it in her eyes, not just dislike, but disdain. The storm had not softened her. It had sharpened her edges. And yet, beneath her words, he had seen something else. A flicker, a moment where fear and curiosity had tangled. He adjusted his grip on the umbrella, eyes narrowing. He felt it too, the weight of being followed. Years in boardrooms and backrooms had sharpened his instincts. He knew the difference between coincidence and intent. And, tonight, there was nothing coincidental about the storm. At another intersection, Anna's steps slowed. She ducked briefly beneath the awning of a closed bookstore, shaking the rain from her hair. The dim light above her sputtered, buzzing, faintly threatening to go out. She closed her eyes, willing herself to breathe, to ignore the fear gnawing at her chest. When she opened them again, she nearly screamed. Across the narrow street, under a pale lamp, the woman in burgundy stood once more. This time closer. Her umbrella tilted just enough to reveal her face, calm, composed eyes gleaming with something sharp. She raised a hand slowly, almost in greeting, though her smile made it clear this was not kindness. Anna froze, heart pounding. Her legs begged to run, but her pride anchored her in place. And then, as a bus rumbled between them, the figure vanished again. "Enough," Anna whispered under her breath, anger rising to shield her from fear. "I won't let them pull me into this." She forced herself back onto the street, each step louder, harsher, as if defiance could drown the dread. Farther down the block, Adrian paused beneath a street lamp of his own. He too had seen the figure. He too knew that this was no coincidence. His eyes swept the shadows, sharp and unyielding. He did not call out. He did not chase. He had learned long ago that some predators thrived on reaction. Instead, he adjusted his collar, straightened his back, and walked forward with the calm of a man who refused to be hunted. But inside, beneath the mask, unease coiled like a serpent. Anna reached the shop at last, its sign dimly lit, its windows fogged from the warmth within. She stepped inside, quickly closing the door against the storm. For a moment, relief washed over her. The air smelled of paper and ink. The floor creaked under her shoes, and no one stared. It was ordinary, blissfully ordinary. And yet as she glanced out the window, she swore she saw it again. The burgundy umbrella, standing across the street, unmoving, watching. The shopkeeper asked if she needed help breaking the spell. Anna forced herself to smile to ask for the supplies she came for. Her voice was steady, but her hands trembled as she reached into her pocket. By the time she looked back outside, the street was empty. She told herself it was fine, that shadows meant nothing, that tomorrow this would all feel like a bad dream. But deep down, she knew better. The storm outside was nothing compared to the storm that had begun the moment Adrian Blackwood walked back into Velour Café. And now someone else was writing themselves into the story, someone who carried danger in every step, every smile, every shadowed glance. The storm had quieted, but the city did not rest. Rain lingered in thin threads dripping from rooftops, tapping against windows, pooling in the uneven cracks of the sidewalks. Anna returned home, drenched her shoes heavy with water, her coat clinging to her skin. The key stuck briefly in the lock before she twisted it open. Stepping into the small apartment she called her refuge. Warmth greeted her in the form of dim lamplight, the faint scent of dried flowers, the soft creak of wood beneath her feet. She exhaled, but it was not relief. The silence felt fragile, as though one wrong thought could shatter it. She changed quickly, trading her soaked uniform for an old sweater and loose pants. The mirror caught her reflection, damp hair, eyes shadowed by fatigue, lips pressed thin. She looked like someone she barely recognized, guarded, unsettled, no longer untouched by the chaos of the day. Curling up on the worn sofa, she pulled a blanket over her legs and stared at her phone lying on the table. It glowed once with a notification, then went dark again. Her fingers hovered hesitating before she unlocked it. The screen reflected her face back at her, pale and tired. She opened a new message window, typing his name, Adrian Blackwood. The letters felt heavy. She had never saved his number, but it was there from the cafe's delivery records, unintentional but unavoidable. Her thumbs hesitated over the keys. "What do you want from me?" She stared at the words, her heart racing. For a moment, she almost pressed send. Almost. Then she deleted them, all the cursor blinking against emptiness. With a frustrated sigh, she tossed the phone aside. Across the city, Adrian sat in his office on the upper floor of a glass tower. The rain streaked against the windows, distorting the skyline into rippling patterns of light. Inside, the air smelled faintly of leather and steel, the hum of silence filling the space between polished shelves and glowing screens. He leaned back in his chair, jacket draped carelessly across the armrest. His tie was loosened, his hair damp from the storm. On his desk lay untouched files reports that demanded attention, but his eyes never settled on them. Instead, they rested on the city beyond, and the echo of Anna's words earlier, "You carry the fire with you. Chaos follows wherever you go." He closed his eyes briefly, jaw tightening. It wasn't the first time someone had said such words, but tonight, spoken from her lips, they landed differently, sharper, deeper, uncomfortably close to truth. His phone buzzed once. He picked it up, thumb swiping the screen. No new messages, only reminders, headlines, noise. Still, he opened a blank message window, scrolling until her name appeared. He hesitated. His fingers typed, "I'm sorry." The words lingered on the screen, small and uncharacteristic. He rarely apologized, and when he did, it was never sincere. But now, staring at those letters, he felt something he had not expected: vulnerability. For several seconds, his thumb hovered over send. Then, with a shake of his head, he deleted the message. The screen went black again, reflecting his own tired eyes. Anna shifted restlessly on her sofa. She had turned the lamp down low, letting shadows fill the corners of the room. Yet even in shadow, she could not escape. Her mind replayed the day in fragments, his cold complaint, the whispers of strangers, the woman's sharp smile, the sudden grip of his hand, pulling her from the path of water. Each memory twisted differently, anger, suspicion, unease. And beneath them all, something she hated most, curiosity. She pulled the blanket tighter around her shoulders as if she could suffocate the thought. Adrian poured himself a glass of whiskey, the amber liquid catching the dim light of his office. He drank slowly, savoring the burn, though it did nothing to quiet his thoughts. In his mind, he saw her face in the rain, wet hair plastered to her skin, eyes blazing with fury. He remembered her words, the way she stood against him despite the storm. Few people dared to confront him so openly. Fewer still lingered in his thoughts afterward. He set the glass down untouched, beyond a sip, and rubbed his temples. The city stretched endlessly outside, a maze of lights and secrets. He had always thrived within it, bending it to his will, but tonight it felt larger than him, indifferent. And she, a waitress, nothing more, nothing less, had managed to shake the ground beneath him. Back in her apartment, Anna reached for her phone again. She unlocked it, opened the message screen, and typed, "Stay away from me." Her thumb hovered, but she didn't press send. She deleted the words one by one, the screen empty once more. She locked the phone, placed it face down, and leaned back against the cushions with a heavy sigh. The rain outside had softened to a drizzle, but the storm inside her chest raged on. At nearly the same moment, Adrian's phone lit once more as he scrolled through old messages. None of them mattered. Business partners, associates, names tied to contracts and power. Not one felt real tonight. He opened the empty message window again, his thumb trembling slightly over the keyboard. This time he typed nothing. He let the silence speak instead. And so, in two different corners of the city, two phones glowed briefly in the darkness. Two sets of hands hovered over keys, two hearts warred against pride, suspicion, fear, and both chose silence. The screens went dark together, leaving only the sound of rain, steady, endless, indifferent. Morning broke reluctantly gray light, seeping through the blinds of Anna's small apartment. The storm had passed, leaving behind streets slick with rain, and a city washed clean on the surface, though not in truth. Beneath the quiet drizzle, the residue of yesterday lingered heavy as ever. Anna stirred awake, her body stiff from restless sleep. She had tossed through the night, the weight of whispers and shadows chasing her into uneasy dreams. The first thing she reached for before coffee, before the mirror, was her phone. The screen blinked to life. Notifications flooded across it like raindrops on glass. She scrolled absently at first, promotions, weather alerts, routine chatter. And then she froze. A headline leapt out at her, bold and merciless. "Billionaire Blackwood, confronted in public, who is the woman in burgundy." Her stomach dropped. She tapped it without meaning to, and the video began. The angle was shaky, recorded from a phone somewhere near the counter of Velour Café. The image was grainy in the dim light, but unmistakable. Adrian standing tall in his black suit, the woman elegant and sharp in burgundy. Their voices, though muted by chatter and clatter, carried enough to be heard. "You'll never bury what you've done." The cafe gasped in unison, captured forever. Adrian's profile tense, silent, immovable. The woman's smile sharp as glass. Anna's breath caught. She had lived it only hours ago, but seeing it replayed from the outside as though she were just another viewer made it feel surreal. The video ended abruptly, but not before catching a glimpse of her in the background tray in hand, eyes wide. Her heart lurched. She hadn't realized anyone had captured her too. The comments scrolled below, endless. "Classic billionaire scandal. They always hide skeletons. Who's the woman, ex-wife, mistress, enemy? Either way, he looks guilty. He doesn't even defend himself. Silence means truth. Wait, is that the waitress? She looks like she knows something." Anna's throat tightened. She set the phone down quickly, but the words burned in her mind. Her own image, blurred though it was now tied to a story she wanted no part of. She had always valued anonymity, the simplicity of a quiet life. And now, in a single day, her face was immortalized in a scandal that was not hers. She paced the apartment, hands trembling slightly. She told herself it didn't matter that people online chased gossip like moths to flame that tomorrow they would forget. But deep down, she knew the truth. Once a story reached the surface, it never truly sank again. And Adrian, he was no stranger to this. He had lived in the fire before. But what unsettled her most was the memory of his eyes last night, the fleeting look beneath the mask. Was it arrogance, pain, or something in between? She hated that she even wondered. Meanwhile, in the glass towers of the city, Adrian watched the same video from his office. His phone buzzed relentlessly with calls from advisors, lawyers, allies pretending loyalty. He ignored most of them, his jaw-tight eyes locked on the screen as the confrontation replayed again and again. The woman's voice cut deeper in replay than it had in person. "You'll never bury what you've done." His reflection in the window stared back at him, a man dressed in power but draped in shadows. He had thought himself immune by now, but the clip was everywhere. News outlets, social media whispered across boardrooms. And, somewhere in the background, frozen mid-step, was Anna. He lingered on that image longer than he should have. Back at Velour Café, the day began almost as normal. Customers arrived drawn not only by the comfort of coffee, but by the echo of scandal. Whispers fluttered at the edges of every table. Curious eyes darted toward the door, as though expecting him to appear again. Anna stood behind this counter, apron tied neatly, her posture straight. To the world, she looked calm, professional, untouchable. But inside, she was unraveling. She wiped the same spot on the counter 3 times before realizing her mind was not here. It was still caught in the video, the comments, the shadow of burgundy coats and black umbrellas. When a customer placed their order, she forced a smile, her voice smooth, but her hands trembled as she poured the coffee. During a brief lull, she found herself staring out the window. The sky was pale, the streets damp, the world deceptively ordinary. And yet she felt the shift subtle but undeniable. Her life, once defined by routine, had tilted. She was no longer just a waitress serving lattes and croissants. She had been pulled unwillingly into a story far larger than herself. Her phone buzzed again. Another notification. Another headline. Adrian Blackwood's past returns mystery woman demands answers. Anna closed her eyes. She could almost hear the voices from the day before echoing around her, whispers, accusations, laughter. The bell above the cafe door chimed. She startled, heart leaping, half expecting him, but it was only a delivery man dripping from the rain, dropping off supplies. Relief mingled with disappointment, though she refused to admit the latter. She busied herself with inventory, yet her mind drifted again and again. The way he had looked at her in the storm. The way silence seemed his only shield. The way danger clung to him like a second skin. She clenched her jaw. No, she would not fall into curiosity, not when it threatened everything she had worked to keep simple. Still, as she scrolled one last time on her break, she paused on a frame frozen in the video. Adrian standing in this cafe, his eyes distant, shoulders squared, silence heavy, and just behind him, her own blurred outline. 2 figures caught in the same frame, tethered by chance, bound by whispers neither of them had chosen. Anna stared at it until the screen dimmed, reflecting her face back at her. Conflicted, curious, afraid. And outside, the storm clouds gathered again, darker this time. Because stories like this never ended with a single clip. They spiraled, they deepened, they pulled everyone inside their orbit until escape was no longer possible. Anna set her phone down, her chest tight, her thoughts louder than the cafe's hum. The question she refused to voice burned silently within her. Was she already too deep to walk away?